recognized.
Without objection.
Mr. President.
Republican leader is recognized.
Mr. President, the clock is ticking. In just a few days, the U.S. government will no longer have the ability to borrow money to pay its bills, a situation that the President and his advisors have said would trigger an economic Armageddon. So I was shocked last night when 53 Senate Democrats issued a letter saying they intend to vote against the only piece of legislation that has any chance of preventing all this from happening. Even more shocking is the fact that Democratic leaders and the President himself have endorsed every feature of this legislation except one. And that's the fact that it doesn't allow the President to avoid another national debate about spending and debt until after the next presidential election. Every other feature of the House bill, it was essentially agreed to earlier, except for one. The President wants to avoid having another discussion about deficit and debt before his election. That assurance is the only thing that the President and Senate Democrats are holding out for right now. The Democrats can try to justify their opposition to the House bill in any way they want to. They can claim they're worried about a stalemate 6 months from now. They can ignore the fact that 31 times Congress and the President have raised the debt limit over the past 25 years. 22 of those debt limit increases lasted less than a year. President Reagan in 1984 signed 3 bills in the course of his election year that raised the debt ceiling. This is not unusual. In fact, what's unusual is to ask for $2.7 trillion in debt limit increase. That's unusual. That's unprecedented. So what's worse, Mr. President, a default now or a potential default 6 months down the road? Because if those 53 Senate Democrats follow through on their threat to filibuster the House bill, that's what they'll be doing. They'll be ensuring default now rather than working with us to prevent it later. Why would you want to do that? To make the President's re-election campaign a little easier is the answer. Now, it's inconceivable to me that the President would actually follow through on this threat. After all, the President's first responsibility is to do what's best for the country, not his re-election campaign. Same goes for our friends on the other side of the aisle. It's inconceivable to me that they would actually block the only bill that could get through the House of Representatives and prevent a default right now. Inconceivable. It's inconceivable to me that they would do this for no other reason than to help the President avoid having another debate before his election about the need for Washington to get its fiscal house in order. Because that's precisely what we may be headed for this weekend. Guaranteed default, or a bill that takes the specter of default off the table while giving us another opportunity to address the very deficits and debts that caused this crisis in the first place. Senate Democrats are playing with fire here, and it's hard to conclude that they're doing it for any other reason than politics. So I would urge our friends on the other side of the aisle this morning to rethink their position and join Republicans in preventing default.